I'm Joe Aston. I'm a team coach and facilitator with TPC Leadership.
So today we're talking about, well, you tell us what we're talking about, Joe. That would be easier.
Talking about leadership teams and why, despite having really smart, capable people who on paper are the right fit for the job, do leadership teams struggle to unlock that performance and operate as the sum of their parts or even more than the sum of their parts?
Excellent. And that's something that you see every day and that I've seen in every role I've ever had. And I think everybody who watches this will have empathy or sympathy with that situation. They'll have seen it in lots of roles.
Yes. And when you're in it, it's hard to see it.
Yeah, exactly. Why is that? Why is that? Do you think that's because of, is it just a human thing? Is that the problem, or is there more to it than that?
What I would say is we become blind to what's familiar. And I think it's subtle. I think a lot of this is we can think, feel, we are having the hard conversations we need to, but unconscious dynamic patterns beneath the surface stop us from seeing what's really going on. It's psychological defenses at the end of the day, right?
Yeah,
we don't want to see what we don't want to see.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we choose to see what we want to see. We were just talking a moment ago about confirmation bias. Our minds will filter out stuff that doesn't align with our self-concept and our idea of who we would like to be as a leader individually or even as a leadership team.
Yeah.
We just filter it out. We look for the evidence that confirms what we'd like to believe.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes the patterns are, they're not visible in the moment. You don't realize what the pattern is unless you zoom out and take a longer term perspective, and you can see so something was agreed on the meeting here, and then there was this drift.
Yeah.
And then we came back and we convinced ourselves the drift completely made sense. So now we're going to recommit to something different.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's more drift. And sometimes, unless there's someone who's less close to the team, helping the team see what's going on, help them see their own patterns. These patterns can be too subtle or too hidden by time, or by the complexity in their organization.
Yeah. So what's the symptoms then? Ultimately, what does that look like? I'm sure there's lots of ways, but what's one or two things you think that people will see in a business that will be the symptoms of a deeper problem?
I think decisions reopening repeatedly. We think the decision's been made, there's a commitment to a strategy, but yet for some reason, things just aren't moving quickly enough. And that could be there's a sense of energy, focus, resources are too scattered. Priorities seem to be drifting between functions. Ownership seems to be unclear. Inconsistency in strategy translating into coordinated, focused action.
I guess so often you see a strategy that looks great on paper, but actually delivery is really, really hard.
I think all too often a team might be facing a strategic decision, and inherent in any course of action, any decision, trade-offs. It means saying no to something to say yes to something else. But all too often, I think that is really uncomfortable to face. And so unconsciously, without realizing it or intending to, those trade-offs are maybe acknowledged at a surface level, but they're not really unpacked. And that then leads to a lack of clarity. Who's going to be absorbing those trade-offs and how will they be supported by other members of the organization?
And I guess by the very nature of strategy, it's about being really decisive on what you're going to do, and probably more importantly, what are you not going to do.
It has to deal with disappointing a stakeholder, working with less resources, pausing something, shifting their own priorities, in a way that maybe affects them more personally. Unless a leader feels like they are supported in working through what the trade-offs mean for their area of responsibility.
Yeah.
And they feel like they've got others backing, relational or practical, to negotiate some of the consequences of really going after a particular strategy with real focus. All too often, they just try and keep it all going, try and honor all the existing commitments that they have.
Keep all the plates spinning rather than focusing on the one or two that are going to make the difference. Yeah. Interesting. So actually, there's an element of agreeing the strategy up front, knowing that overall is what the business really needs to focus on, but then getting back to the day job, let's call it, actually becomes a lot harder for the individual.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes this doesn't get unpacked because in most teams, people want to be a team player.
Yeah.
Want to support the collective, want to get behind the energy. Yeah, right. I'm on board. And sometimes people need help. Leaders need help with exploring what does this really mean? What will the consequences really be? What's going to be difficult? What support or backing might I need from others to really play my part? Because as we said before, right, that the trade-offs and the consequences, they don't fall evenly on everybody's shoulders.
Yeah. And what then do you think, in terms of what's a solution for this, what's the approach that you've seen that really helps to keep a strategy on track when it's in the sort of throes of execution and at that delicate point where people could start kind of, pulling it apart or kind of being distracted by what they've done previously?
There's no one single strategy that solves it. I think what immediately comes to mind is at least 3 parts to the solution. So the first part being what we've already discussed, which is before the decision's made, really unpacking the trade-offs, what it means to pursue a course of action, so that the decision is a more informed one, and it's a decision that's being made cognizant of all the other decisions and supporting measures that be required to go after the main decision, right? So because the second and third order consequences have actually been worked through, the competing commitments have been acknowledged. The team have actually been supported with letting go of some of the things that they would love to do that maybe they would cling on to as much as they could.
So first one being properly unpack all the consequences of a strategic decision to make sure you really know, not just as an overall business, but for the individual leaders and the individual teams in that business, what that really means in terms of where they stop, start and continue.
Yeah. So, and it's both the practical stuff and it's the emotional stuff. Yeah. So what it's going to mean for the leader, what it's going to mean for their function, what it's going to mean for their teams, it's going to mean for the need to support each other with executing. Yeah. So that's the first bit. Secondly, how do we know we're executing on it? If we are pursuing the strategy, what data, what signals will be telling us whether something's working or whether we need to course correct? So being clear on outcomes, being clear on the definition of done, to use a phrase from the world of Agile. And then, of course, there's the need to have the right checkpoints. All too often, there's a commitment to a course of action. It's too long. Any individual leader trying to problem solve and work through something by themselves doesn't mean that they can't keep going and continue to execute, but they're doing so ineffectively, where their peers on a leadership team stepping in and finding out what obstacles are you coming up against. What kind of support would help you? Are there others who we can bring in here to complement what you're doing with their own networks, their own relationships, their own background and experience? So to recap, really working out the trade-offs, getting clear on the outcomes, success indicators, the checking in and the monitoring. All too often with teams, there's maybe your review of strategy periodically, it's just saying even biannually. And then there's these long periods in between where the course correction isn't happening as a whole team.
Yeah. Okay.
Leaders are too much on their own. So we've got that. And then embedding in that, those check-ins, the opportunity to make sure we're capturing the signal. Like what are the signs? What are the patterns? What's really going on? Really interrogating that. You can't interrogate that from a singular perspective. That's where you need a kind of multiplicity of different perspectives, different ways of thinking to interrogate that data. And again, if it's left to a single leader just to go execute by themselves, you're not tapping into the intelligence of the whole team. So there's a need for structure and rhythms that typical leadership teams don't tend to use that often.
And at the start of it, a real candor around what you've done in the past and how you're going to operate going forwards needs properly unpacking. Otherwise, you're not set up for success from the start. People will drift more easily, I guess, from day one onwards.
Yeah, and you're never going to get the rhythms and the structures right first time.
Yep.
They'll need to change. The nature of the strategic work you're delivering changes.
Yep.
As your organizational context changes. So this whole operating model we're talking about, work through the trade-offs, get clear on outcomes, make sure you're having the right kinds of check-ins where you're looking at the right kind of data, having the right kinds of conversations about course correction, support, learning. Those rhythms and structures themselves require regular refresh to make sure they fit for purpose.
Yeah.
Teams start to internalize those ways of thinking, ways of asking each other questions, and then some also just get dropped because we feel like we're doing it now. We're executing. Remember some of the stuff we don't need anymore because we've gotten the act of execute. So if you think it's so funny, in business, in organizations, this idea of teams having a coach, it's often seen as a bit of an extravagance. It's seen as something. Maybe it's a significant investment, but you look at any sports team, how much of the time are they competing versus how much of the time are they actually training? completely flipped.
Completely
And
opposite.
how much coaching are they actually having all the time when they're competing and when they're training? Someone is calling timeouts. Can you see what's happening in the game here?
That's about winning tomorrow's match versus being top of the league at the end of the season.
Yes, it's now and in the future, isn't it? I mean, the great coaches, they're not thinking about just the current game, are they? They're thinking about the development of the team over time. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. So that's ultimately why TPC developed Perfects, wasn't it? It was really to try and capture all of those three areas and be able to deliver that and support companies actually in that challenge from developing and defining strategy into execution. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, we recognize that most interventions to enhance team performance typically only address half the problem. An intervention might just look at the relationship dynamics, team history, working styles, role clarity, something like that, or even team selection. So how people seem to be working together, but then may exclude looking at the team's, in a way, operating system, rhythms, structures, the habits and patterns that keep the team connected to what's going on around them and help them interpret what's going on around them and make decisions in an effective way, and then follow through and support each other in an effective way. Most team development solutions are partial and they are burdensome in the sense that they require a team to remove themselves from the business, extended periods of time at great expense, to explore some ideas in a way that's typically quite disconnected from their work. Then the leadership team needs to somehow hold on to some of those ideas and then by themselves usually find a way to embed and apply them in their day-to-day work. And we thought, we know from looking at teams that are great at execution that these rhythms and structures that keep the team responding to change and focused, they do not have to be burdensome. They can be lightweight. And those kinds of rhythms that maybe most leadership teams don't use, but maybe more delivery teams might, they're relevant and they are adaptable to leadership teams. So we thought, let's bring the best of what helps teams that are great at executing to the world of leadership teams where they are wrestling with complexity, strategic trade-offs, and, well, the work of shaping and executing strategy. And let's combine that with the work that we know is really important to unlock interpersonal and team effectiveness in terms of how the teams include each other, make the most of their differences, bounce back from setbacks, find a sense of shared purpose and direction. So all these elements are important, but we saw there was a gap. They're not all being addressed together in a way that is accessible to a team. We wanted to design a solution that would integrate into a team's existing meetings and even replace their existing meetings.
Yeah, I see.
So this was something that could be training the team or helping the team internalize a way of operating that they could own and make their own.
Yeah. So it's actually really a structured method to the whole thing. From our experience of seeing teams performing well and not so well, we've boiled it down to what we think are the really structural things that we can deliver to help them to do just that.
Yes, and it's not a one-size-fits-all recipe in terms of the structures we'd recommend. We build on what is working and plug in the gaps that are quite clearly a deficit in terms of some of the rhythms and structures to keep a team kind of honest with themselves, focused on what's important, and making sure the signal and the learning isn't being lost as they execute.
Great. And what are we seeing from teams that we're working with on it?
Number one, they're saying more honest conversations, which is leading to a more robust conversation about what it would really mean to execute on the strategic priorities, what it would really mean to execute on them faster rather than trying to do everything at once, working out what is the highest leverage critical path, executing the strategy in a way where more of the team is supporting the execution. It's less individual elements of strategy falling on individual leaders' shoulders and more finding a way to sequence the work where the team and the wider organization can experience more of an aligned focus on enabling the leadership team and the wider organization to experience less context switching and more focus and more support in going after the strategic priority that is in focus for any given period of time. And whilst keeping the operational performance measures at the level that they need to be. So
I see.
I think it's fair to say every leadership team I've worked on, that is often what they experience as their biggest challenge, particularly in smaller organizations. I think it's fair to say where they feel like there's less resource to tap into. or less, wherever there's an organization where top leadership teams feels like the leadership pipeline is a little bit weaker, less capable layers supporting them. I don't want to be too pejorative here. It is basically babysitting. Being pulled into looking after and troubleshooting and providing a high level of oversight of what we could classify as non-strategic work.
Great. Well, listen, it's been good talking about all of these challenges, and what just to sum up, what would you say is the key thing for you in terms of how Perfect's our product around all of this can help organizations?
TPC Leadership has its heritage in performance coaching, actually in sports performance coaching. That's where the founders of TPC Leadership started working together.
Yeah, sure.
What a famous idea from Timothy Galway was this idea that the performance of an individual is about removing the interference that is undermining the potential that's already there. Well, we do see that same principle applying to teams too. So teams have an inner game, which is like the internal dynamics that shape how a team operates together. And then there's the outer game, which is how they create impacts in the external system. Performance is the product of that inner and outer game, denominated by how much interference is going on.
Yeah, I see.
The interference, comes from the differences in the team members and the differences between the team members and the wider organization and the wider stakeholders. Where there's kind of friction that's unexplored, that becomes the constraint on the performance. These internal dynamics and the impact the team can create externally. Crucially, it's about pinpointing what is the break for this particular team at this point in time. And different performance constraints have more of an impact depending on what type of team they are and depending on what context they're working in. So we have a diagnostic that pinpoints for teams what is the performance constraint that's having the biggest impact on performance. So the team can remove that immediately. On the other constraints that maybe are having a lesser difference, but do that in a sequence that's informed by research and data from thousands of teams around the world about what is going to make the biggest difference. And therefore, in what order should we work on removing these breaks on performance?
Great. So, Joe, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
It was fun, David.
It
My
was
pleasure.
a lot of fun. Thank you, Joe.
Let's do this again.